Howard Cosell had survived everything. He defended Muhammad Ali when the world turned against him. He faced death threats for standing up for civil rights. He battled network executives and angry fans for decades. Nothing could touch him. Then, one September night, everything collapsed. A single sentence during a football game triggered the biggest scandal in broadcasting history. What did he say that was so shocking it ended a legendary career instantly? The answer will surprise you, especially when you learn who defended him. Howard Cosell was born Howard William Cohen on March 25, 1918, in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. His parents were Jewish immigrants who had fled Eastern Europe to escape persecution and find a better life in America. His father, Isidore, worked as an accountant. His mother, Nellie, stayed at home. They believed education was the only way out of hardship, and that belief shaped Howard's future. The family didn't stay in North Carolina for long. Before Howard turned 3, they moved to Brooklyn, New York. Brooklyn was crowded, loud, and full of immigrants trying to build new lives. That's where Howard began to develop his sharp tongue and unshakable confidence. While other kids fought with fists, Howard used words. He read books, quoted them on the playground, and never backed down from a verbal fight. He was smart, cocky, and always ready with a comeback. His ego was already forming, and it never really stopped growing. As he grew older, Howard started to understand the power of identity. During law school at NYU in the late 1930s, he made a personal and professional decision. He changed his last name from Cohen to Cosell. He said it came from his grandfather's original Polish name, before it was changed at Ellis Island. The name change wasn't just about family pride. It was also about standing out in a field where having a Jewish name could hold someone back. Cosell didn't want to blend in. He wanted to make people remember him. In high school at Alexander Hamilton in Brooklyn, Howard became sports editor of the school paper. Even then, he didn't write fluff. He wrote sharp, bold opinions. Some students hated him. Some teachers admired him. But no one could ignore him. He wasn't afraid to call out bad coaching or poor play. At just 16, he was already acting like the tough broadcaster he would become. By the time he was 21, Cosell had earned 2 degrees from NYU, a BA in English literature and a law degree. That was rare. He was smart, driven, and moving fast. But success wasn't enough. He didn't just want a stable job. He wanted influence, fame, a voice. His parents were proud, but they didn't quite understand the fire that was driving their son. When World War II broke out, Cosell joined the U.S. Army. He served as a major in the Transportation Corps from 1942 to 1945 at the New York port of embarkation. It was a huge responsibility. He helped organize the movement of troops and supplies across the Atlantic. A single mistake could delay entire missions. But Cosell thrived. He earned his rank young and became one of the youngest officers in that role. He was calm, efficient, and knew how to get things done. That job showed he could handle pressure and power. While stationed in New York, Howard met Corporal Mary Edith Emmy Abrams, a WAC sergeant. At the time, it was against the rules for officers to date enlisted personnel. But Cosell didn't care. He went straight to a general and asked for permission. That move required guts and paperwork, but the general approved it. Howard and Emmy kept seeing each other, despite doubts from her family, who were conservative Presbyterians. Cosell never let rules stop him, not even in love. They got married in 1944 while he was still in the Army. The wedding happened in a Brooklyn judge's chambers. Their marriage lasted 46 years, until Emmy died in 1990. After the war ended, Cosell returned to New York and opened a law practice in Manhattan. He quickly built a client list that included some big names, like baseball legend Willie Mays. He earned around $25,000 to $30,000 a year, a strong income for that time. But something was already building inside him. Even while practicing law, he felt trapped. He didn't enjoy it. He'd pace around his office, pretending to deliver speeches to juries or narrating fake sports games. Friends thought it was strange. He thought it was necessary. He once told a journalist that he lacked sufficient mediocrity to survive in the business. He needed something more, something louder, something public. And sports radio gave it to him. In 1953, Howard Cosell got his first real break. Hal Neal from ABC Radio invited him to host a small show on WABC in New York. The idea was simple. Little League kids would interview Major League Baseball players. Cosell agreed, even though he wouldn't be paid. He kept working as a lawyer during the day and did the radio show on the side. For almost 3 years, he didn't earn a single dollar from it. But he didn't care. He saw it as a way in. The show was light and playful, but Cosell started learning something deeper. One moment stood out. Yankees outfielder Hank Bauer casually criticized his manager Casey Stengel on air. That small slip became a headline. Cosell saw how powerful real, unscripted conversation could be. He realized that if you just let people talk, they often revealed the truth. That stuck with him. ABC President Robert Pauley later challenged Cosell to find a sponsor for a new sports segment. Cosell took the challenge head-on. He got the sponsor and launched Speaking of Sports. That show would end up running for decades. Cosell's hustle and sharp instincts were paying off. He wasn't just hosting anymore. He was starting to shape how sports stories were told. By 1956, Cosell was done playing it safe. He moved from light interviews to full-time sports reporting for ABC Radio. Most sportscasters back then played nice. They tossed easy questions and avoided anything too personal or controversial. But Cosell came in swinging. In one early interview, he bluntly asked a player if his teammates avoided passing to him because he shot too much. People weren't used to that. He kept pushing. He listened carefully to every answer and always followed up if he thought something was being hidden. Some hated that style. Others respected it. Athletes like Tommy Smith, who gave the Black Power salute at the 1968 Olympics, chose Cosell for interviews because they trusted him. They knew he would let them speak freely and treat their views seriously. That trust mattered. Over time, Cosell became known for one thing. He told the truth. He didn't act like a cheerleader. He wasn't there to flatter athletes or protect anyone's image. He called out bad behavior. He criticized poor performance. He talked about race, politics, and war, even when people told him to stick to sports. Some fans loved him. Others hated him. But no one ignored him. He was called the most hated man in sports, and also the conscience of American sports broadcasting. His voice, with its sharp rhythm and clear tone, became unforgettable. His phrase, "This is Howard Cosell, telling it like it is," stuck in people's minds. Then there was his connection with Muhammad Ali. In 1964, the world knew him as Cassius Clay. But when he stepped up and told the world his new name was Muhammad Ali, most people refused to accept it. Newspapers kept calling him Clay. TV anchors avoided saying Ali. The backlash was instant and brutal. But there was one man who stood up and said the name loud and clear: Howard Cosell. On national television, Cosell called him Muhammad Ali. He didn't care that millions were angry. He didn't care that hate mail poured into his mailbox. He believed Ali had the right to be who he was, and Cosell wasn't going to back down. He knew what it meant to be an outsider, a Jewish kid from Brooklyn who had been bullied for his background, Cosell understood prejudice. That's why he stood with Ali, even when it put his own career at risk. He said, "It's his name, and I'll call him what he wishes." That one decision changed everything. It wasn't just about boxing. It was about identity, respect, and courage. From that moment, Ali and Cosell were bonded by something deeper than sport. Then came 1967. The Vietnam War was raging. Young men were being drafted by the thousands. Muhammad Ali said no. He refused to fight in a war he didn't believe in. He said it went against his faith, and he wouldn't kill people who had never harmed him. The punishment was swift. He lost his boxing license. He was banned from the ring. They stripped him of his title. Most of the media turned against him. They called him a coward, a traitor. But Cosell didn't. He went on air and called the government's actions inhuman and illegal. He said it was wrong to punish Ali for his beliefs. Sponsors threatened to pull their ads. Networks warned him to stay quiet. But Cosell didn't flinch. He said what no one else would. He saw the double standard. Rich white draft dodgers went unpunished. But Ali, young, black, and bold, was made an example. Cosell called it out, loud and clear. And again, the hate mail returned. But this time, it only strengthened their friendship. They weren't just broadcaster and boxer anymore. They were two men standing against a storm. And then there was the magic they created on screen. For nearly 20 years, Ali and Cosell lit up TV screens. Their interviews felt like boxing matches. Ali would poke fun at Cosell's hairpiece, laugh at his big words, and promise to knock him out just for fun. Cosell would roll his eyes, hit back with sarcasm, and challenge Ali on everything. They argued, laughed, teased each other, and kept the audience hooked every time. It was more than entertainment. It was a conversation between equals, brutally honest, but always respectful. One time, Ali shouted, "Every time you open your mouth, you should be arrested for air pollution." Cosell replied, "You'd still be in poverty if I hadn't made you." It was bold, funny, raw. But beneath the jokes, they admired each other. They trusted each other. They knew the cameras couldn't fake that kind of bond. When Ali was banned from boxing and almost forgotten by the world, Cosell didn't forget. While others turned their backs, Cosell opened his studio doors. He kept inviting Ali on air. They talked about his faith, his decision to stay out of the war, his dreams, his fears. In one interview at the Houston Astrodome, you could see the sweat on Ali's face after a hard workout. But Cosell didn't ask about the fight. He asked about the man. And people listened. Ali wasn't a villain anymore. He was a human being. And Cosell helped make that happen. Then came the night in 1973. Joe Frazier was in the ring with George Foreman. Millions were watching. Round after round, Frazier hit the canvas, and Cosell's voice rang through TVs across the world. 3 simple words, shouted 3 times. "Down goes Frazier. Down goes Frazier. Down goes Frazier." It was raw emotion. It was disbelief. And it became the most famous call in boxing history. People still quote it, still laugh about it, and still feel it. That night, Cosell didn't just narrate a fight. He captured a moment in time, a moment that proved sport wasn't just about who won. It was about what we felt watching it. And no one made us feel like Cosell did. Ali would later say that Cosell gave him a voice when no one else would listen. Cosell once said that Ali helped him become more than just a broadcaster. He became part of the story. Together, they pushed America to confront race, religion, war, and identity. Not with anger, but with words, with dignity, and with courage. In 1970, ABC executive Roone Arledge made a decision that changed American television forever. He hired Howard Cosell, to be part of the new Monday Night Football broadcast team. This was a complete gamble. Cosell wasn't a former football player. He wasn't even a traditional sports broadcaster. He was loud, opinionated, and had a voice that demanded attention. Arledge didn't want bland commentary. He wanted sparks, and that's exactly what Cosell brought. The NFL wasn't happy. For years, the league had insisted on approving who sat in the broadcast booth. Arledge said no. He stood firm, refusing to let the league control his team. And it paid off. Ratings jumped 50% in that first season. Viewers were hooked, not just on football, but on the show around the game. The following year, in 1971, Arledge made another bold move. He replaced respected announcer Keith Jackson with Frank Gifford. Gifford had never done play-by-play before, but he was a football star with a calm, likable presence. Arledge wasn't looking for experience. He was building a trio. Cosell brought the drama, Don Meredith added humor, and now Gifford would balance them out. It worked. Ratings soared again. ABC was charging $65,000 for a single ad minute during the game, a massive sum for the time. This trio didn't just change football coverage, they redefined what live sports could be on television. They weren't just announcers, they were part of the show. What kept people watching wasn't just the games, it was the sparks flying between Cosell and Meredith. Cosell's sharp tone and Meredith's relaxed humor created a tension that was impossible to ignore. They argued on air. They teased each other. Once in 1974, they were both suspected of being a little drunk on live TV. The audience didn't care. They loved it. People started picking sides. Team Cosell or Team Meredith. Bars and living rooms buzzed with debate. And Arledge encouraged it. He knew conflict made good television. The show didn't feel scripted. It felt real. And that made it unforgettable. Cosell also had a voice that turned simple moments into events. One phrase in particular became iconic: he could go all the way. It was dramatic. It was slow. It was pure Cosell. He didn't just describe the action. He turned it into a story. Sometimes he'd even tell personal details about a player's life before delivering the line. It wasn't just a touchdown, it was a triumph. The phrase became so popular that other broadcasters started copying it. Chris Berman made it part of his act on ESPN. Today, the phrase still shows up in highlight reels and comedy sketches. It wasn't just a catchphrase, it was a symbol of how Cosell brought entertainment into the booth. But Cosell wasn't loved by everyone. His public feud with sports columnist Dick Young became legendary. Young called him names in print, like Howie the Fraud, and even tried to sabotage his interviews by shouting obscenities during tapings. It was personal, it was loud, and it was symbolic. Young represented the old world of newspapers. Cosell was the face of television. They weren't just fighting each other, they were fighting for the future of sports media. Cosell fired back just as hard, calling Young a right-wing cultural illiterate. Their war of words played out in columns, on air, and even in locker rooms. It wasn't just ego. It was a clash between two worlds that were quickly moving in different directions. Cosell also had friction with fellow broadcasters. One of them was Chris Economaki, a legend in motorsports coverage. Economaki once said Cosell had the biggest ego he'd ever seen. Their conflict wasn't about ratings, it was personal. Cosell held grudges. After Economaki made a minor mistake during an interview, Cosell brought it up again and again. Even a simple introduction at a Christmas party set him off. He didn't forget slights, no matter how small. And people around him noticed. Working with Cosell could be exhausting, but his presence always drew attention. That mix of brilliance and conflict became part of his mystique. Another famous critic was Jimmy Cannon. He took aim at Cosell in print, mocking his toupee and his name change from Cohen to Cosell. Cannon didn't just attack the broadcaster, he questioned the man himself. He called Cosell fake, saying he was all performance. He even joked that if Cosell were a sport, he'd be roller derby. The insult stuck. Cosell's look and voice made him a target for parody. But that didn't stop him. In fact, it made him even more famous. Critics fueled his legend. He was controversial, he was combative, and he didn't mind. In fact, Cosell openly criticized the trend of hiring former athletes as broadcasters. He called it jockocracy. He believed the job should go to people who trained for it, not just people who played the game. That put him at odds with co-hosts like Gifford and Meredith. He didn't hide his opinion. He said ex-players lacked insight and depth. It was a risky stance. Viewers liked seeing familiar faces. But Cosell stuck to his view. He believed sports commentary should be thoughtful and informed, not just casual conversation. His criticism sparked real debate about what sports broadcasting should be. He didn't win many friends with that attitude, but he did make people think. Howard Cosell was loud, proud, and often over the top on television. But behind the scenes, he was a quiet man who didn't want to go anywhere without his wife, Emmy. Her real name was Mary Edith Abrams. They got married in 1944 and stayed together for 46 years. Howard once told a reporter, "I wouldn't even cross the Triborough Bridge without Emmy." He meant it. Emmy followed him everywhere. Games, events, interviews. People in the industry knew how close they were. Even his daughters said he couldn't function without her. She gave him balance. After she died in 1990, everything changed. His health got worse. His spirit faded. Within a year, he had surgery to remove a tumor. 2 years later, he left broadcasting for good. People who only knew the tough version of Cosell on TV were stunned by how broken he was without her. That side of him, the quiet love and dependence, had always been hidden behind the noise. At home, Howard was nothing like the man people saw on camera. The shouting, the arguments, the fast talking. That was all part of the job. In private, he was calm. He was gentle. He had 2 daughters, Jill and Hillary, and he loved reading them poetry from Keats and Shelley. On walks, he recited lines softly. He played card games with neighbors. He rarely raised his voice. Emmy kept him grounded. She was the only person who could calm him down when he got too worked up. Hillary once said he couldn't live without her, and it showed. He was always softer around his grandchildren, too. He was never the mouth that roared at home. Instead, he was thoughtful, humble, and deeply attached to his family. That version of Howard was real, but most people never saw it. While Cosell was building his career, he started drinking. Monday Night Football brought fame and stress, and sometimes too much vodka. On November 23, 1970, in freezing Philadelphia, he drank several martinis before going on air. During the live broadcast, he slurred the word Philadelphia and called it Philadelphia. Then he vomited right on Don Meredith's cowboy boots. He had to leave the booth. Viewers were shocked, but it wasn't the only time. People at ABC said he often drank before, during, and after shows. In 1984, during the baseball playoffs, Al Michaels had enough. He told Cosell to his face, "You're ruining the fucking telecast." It became a serious problem. The network didn't know what to do. Ratings were still high, but Cosell's behavior made him unpredictable. His drinking became part of his legacy, something fans remember as clearly as his voice. Under all the confidence, Cosell was insecure. Deep down, he was afraid people didn't like him. That fear drove him. He fought with co-hosts, challenged sports officials, and argued with executives. But it wasn't always about truth. Sometimes it was about proving he belonged. He once said that only Frank Sinatra got more negative press than he did. He constantly asked producers if others were turning against him. He worried about being replaced. The bold opinions and sharp words were often a shield. He needed to be seen. He needed to be respected. And when he wasn't, it cut deep. People thought he was arrogant. But many of his outbursts came from fear, not pride. One of Cosell's most unforgettable moments came on December 8, 1980. During the final minute of a football game between the Dolphins and the Patriots, he got word that John Lennon had been shot and killed outside his apartment in New York. Cosell paused. He didn't want to say it on air. His co-host Frank Gifford told him he had to, so Cosell went live. He told millions of viewers, "This is just a football game, an unspeakable tragedy confirmed to us by ABC News. John Lennon, shot twice in the back, dead on arrival." It was quiet after that. People sat frozen in their homes. No one was expecting to hear that kind of news during a game. But it was a moment that showed how powerful television could be. Cosell wasn't just a sports announcer that night. He was the one who told America that one of its most loved voices was gone. On the night of September 5, 1983, millions of Americans sat in front of their TVs watching Monday Night Football. The Dallas Cowboys and Washington Redskins were battling it out, and the atmosphere was electric. But what people remember most about that night had nothing to do with touchdowns or final scores. As Washington wide receiver Alvin Garrett darted through defenders, Howard Cosell made a comment that would end his career. He said, "That little monkey gets loose, doesn't he?" In just 6 words, Cosell sparked a national firestorm. Viewers were stunned. The phones at ABC lit up with complaints. By morning, newspapers and talk shows were tearing the moment apart. Cosell, a giant in sports broadcasting for decades, was suddenly at the center of one of the biggest controversies in television history. Reverend Joseph Lowry, president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, didn't wait to react. He called for a public apology, and he didn't just stop at Cosell. He sent telegrams to ABC executives demanding they take action. Lowry used the moment to highlight a larger issue. He pointed out the contrast between the number of black athletes on the field and the near-total absence of black voices in the broadcast booth. The backlash spread quickly. Radio shows, newspaper editorials, and TV panels exploded with debate. The demand for Cosell's firing grew louder with each passing hour. Cosell tried to control the damage. At first, he claimed he hadn't said "little monkey" at all. He said he only remarked that Garrett moved like one, and meant it as a compliment to his agility. ABC tried to back him up, saying he wasn't talking about Garrett's appearance, but his quickness. But the tapes didn't lie. Journalists replayed the footage and confirmed what viewers had heard. Cosell had said the exact words being denied. This only made things worse. Instead of ending the controversy, the denials turned it into a scandal. Cosell's credibility, once rock solid, began to crumble. Under pressure, Cosell defended himself. He said "little monkey" was a phrase he'd used for years, with no racial meaning. He pointed to earlier broadcasts, including a 1972 game where he called white player Mike Adamle a little monkey. In 1982, he used the same term for Glenn Hubbard, another white athlete. He even said he used it affectionately with his grandchildren. Supporters argued that Cosell's track record mattered. He had always spoken up for civil rights. He had defended Muhammad Ali when few others did. But none of that seemed to matter. Context was quickly buried under outrage. Then came a surprise. Some of Cosell's strongest defenders were black athletes and civil rights leaders. Jesse Jackson publicly supported him. Muhammad Ali stood by his side, and Alvin Garrett himself, the man Cosell had been describing, said he didn't find the comment offensive. Garrett explained, "I liked Howard Cosell. I didn't feel that it was a demeaning statement." But public opinion had already turned. The media had framed the story as a racial insult, and that version stuck. Even with all the support, Cosell couldn't escape the storm. The controversy took on a life of its own, one that didn't care about past friendships or good intentions. By the end of the 1983 season, Cosell was done. 13 years after helping reinvent Monday Night Football, he stepped away. He called the experience emotionally draining. It wasn't just the scandal that wore him down. He had grown disillusioned with the direction football and television were heading. His departure marked the end of an era. Cosell had once been a fearless voice, unafraid to challenge athletes, coaches, and even the leagues themselves. Now, a single sentence had ended it all. Though he continued on radio until 1992, his presence on TV was never the same. His personal life soon began to fall apart. In 1991, at age 73, he was diagnosed with cancer. Doctors found a tumor in his chest, and he went through surgery that June. At the same time, he was coping with the death of his wife, Emmy, who had been his partner and emotional anchor. Cosell tried to stay active on radio, but it was clear he was fading. By 1992, he retired for good. He spent his final years battling not only cancer, but heart disease, Parkinson's, and several minor strokes. Interviews from that time show a man full of regret. He felt like he had been pushed out before completing the work he started. The same voice that once shaped how America saw sports had gone quiet. The world barely noticed. On April 23, 1995, Howard Cosell died in New York at age 77. The cause was a heart embolism. News of his death brought mixed reactions. Some called him a legend and a pioneer, a man who made sports broadcasting smarter and bolder. Others remembered only the controversies, the arrogance, and the final downfall. There were glowing obituaries and sharp critiques. Some fans mourned, others shrugged. His legacy had been forever changed by that one night in 1983. Even so, the world didn't forget his contributions. In 1993, 2 years before his death, TV Guide named him the all-time best sportscaster. That same year, he entered the International Jewish Sports Hall of Fame. In 1994, he was inducted into the Television Hall of Fame, although he was too ill to attend. More honors followed. In 1996, he received a posthumous Sports Emmy for Lifetime Achievement. He was also added to the American Sportscasters Hall of Fame, and later the International Boxing Hall of Fame. These awards were a final recognition that, despite the scandal, Cosell had changed the game forever.